Hello, Gamecock fans. I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. Welcome back to Ball Don't Lie, SGTV's premier live sports show.
JP and I will be giving you our weekly insight every Friday.
This week on the show, we're talking collegiate football and basketball in and outside the Palmetto State.
We've got insight on South Carolina's hunt for a bowl game in football, as well as a recap on Clemson's big loss to the Gamecocks in women's basketball.
Also, be sure to stick around for our coverage of a few NCAA Tip-Off Tournaments, as well as Week 6 of head-to-head college football pick'ems.
And without further ado, welcome to Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome to the Kennedy Greenhouse Studio.
I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. When you get it all right, you can hear that, and it just flies out of Founders.
An 18-year-old phenom, Gigi Jackson, has really turned his play up a notch. I'm almost 2 years older than Gigi Jackson. He's doing things I couldn't even dream of doing.
They're the Golden Gamecocks. They're just so much fun to watch. What a historic year for them.
This is Ball Don't Lie.
South Carolina crushed Vanderbilt in SEC conference play last weekend, and Spencer, you know, it was really something we've been waiting to see from the Gamecocks all year long, where they just really took an opponent to the woodshed and one that is playing on a more level playing field than some of their other wins.
Absolutely. A dominant win was something I'm sure all Gamecock fans were excited to see. And I think it was the defense with a much more surprising performance than I think even we were expecting from them just last week. But the offensive side of the ball, they really got going, as we've crowned Spencer Rattler the MVP of the game. 351 yards, 4 total touchdowns, monster performance from him.
Absolutely, and it was in a dreary, rainy Columbia afternoon, and he was really still able to sling it. He's one of the best in college football in terms of completion percentage. He's above 70% on the season. And it's really just a testament to, despite how this season has gone for the team, he's still taking the same approach and giving it his all week in, week out. You know, you're in a game, it's 2-8 Vanderbilt versus 3-6 South Carolina. And he's out there playing just like he did against Tennessee a couple years ago. And so it really speaks a lot to him. But also, I want to give a quick shout out to Mario Anderson, who broke, like, it seemed like 11 billion tackles on a 72-yard rushing touchdown to really put South Carolina in the permanent driver's seat in that game.
Yeah, I don't know what number you just said, but it was sure a lot. I mean, he just ran through the entire defense and somehow ended up in the end zone, and he's kind of breathed new life into this, at least the running back room. But I'd say the offense as a whole there was kind of a bunch of question marks, especially to start the season, as who would kind of showcase himself as the premier back, and if it wasn't certain already, it sure is now. It's Mario Anderson. That big 72-yard touchdown, incredible stuff, as well as Xavier Leggett with another memorable performance from him, 9 catches, 120 yards, and he's over the 1,000-yard mark, isn't he, JP?
Yeah, he is. He's joining some very exclusive company, one of the few Gamecock wide receivers to pull that off. The 5th most receiving yards in a season, and he's one of 5 South Carolina players to ever have over 1,000 yards in a season, joining Alshon Jeffrey, Sidney Rice, Pharaoh Cooper, and Sterling Sharp. With his 5th most receiving yards in a season, he's 13 behind Sharp's 1986 season for 4th place, and he needs above over 400 yards to get first. But, you know, anything can happen. Hopefully the Gamecocks will have 3 games to do that, because they're still fighting for a bowl bid, ain't they?
They sure are, as the Gamecocks look to keep their bowl game hopes alive this Saturday in another SEC matchup as they host the Kentucky Wildcats under the lights at Willie B. JP, this game is shaping up to be a good one.
Absolutely, and you know, it's a Kentucky team that they didn't think they'd be here in this kind of situation. They started the year 5-0. New transfer quarterback Devin Leary, new transfer tailback Ray Davis, as you can see there, 929 yards on the season with 12 total touchdowns. And it was, like I said, they started 5-0, but man, they've hit a tough skid as of late. They've lost 4 out of their last 5, with 3 of those losses being by 17 or more points. The one caveat, Devin Leary's picked up his play in these losses, so if the Wildcats are able to turn this around, finish out the year 8-4, which would require an upset win of in-state rival Louisville, it's going to be behind the arm of the grad transfer from NC State, Devin Leary.
Yeah, and he hasn't looked great in the big games. We saw him really, really struggle against Georgia, struggled against Missouri, and last week against Alabama, the whole team, they were down 21-0 in, less than 10 minutes. Just, it was a bad look for the Wildcats. And some more stats for the Gamecocks, as the defensive ratings have, you know, they've still got a couple in the 100 marks.
Not last.
They're getting closer to 0, and it's like golf. Lower score wins here, you know. You want to be higher up.
Well, if anything is like golf, maybe the Carolina Panthers can take that to heart. But, you know, South Carolina, Kentucky, there's the bad blood. There's the beef. There's the stewing there with Mark Stoops and Shane Beamer. how is that going to come into play with this huge night game environment? You know, a night game in Columbia is one of the toughest places to play in all of college football, no matter how good South Carolina is doing. And now the Gamecocks are coming into this game with some momentum, riding a 2-game win streak, an opportunity to get back to a bowl game. It would be so huge for this program to have 3 straight bowl appearances under Shane Beamer in his first 3 years. And, you know, they're going to be fighting like their lives depend on it. This Saturday night, but it's a Kentucky team. They're not going to take it lying down. We've seen them come out hot against Tennessee, against Florida, and not against Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah.
But South Carolina ain't Alabama and Georgia. So, you know, I think it's going to be a really fun game. You know, 2 defenses that have really kind of struggled on the year, 2 experienced quarterbacks. Devin Leary is sub 50% completion percentage on the year, on the road, and this is going to be the toughest environment he's played in.
Both road teams have taken, like 2 years ago, Kentucky won here. We won in Lexington last year. So, you know, it's been the road team that's had the success, but I know I can speak for South Carolina fans when they're excited for a night game here at Williams-Brice. It's a
After
tough
like
place to
5
play.
straight noon games.
Yeah.
But, you know, it really just, there's nothing more to really say. It's not just the biggest game of the season. It is the season for South Carolina, because outside of this, we only got one more game. You only get 12 guaranteed opportunities each fall on the schedule. You got to make each one count. And the Gamecocks with their backs up against the wall, it should be a pretty fun one. But, you know, not the only team to get a big win last week here in South Carolina. Clemson defeated Georgia Tech last week to secure a bowl game after they've notched 2 straight wins at home in the friendly confines of Clemson Memorial Stadium. As you can see there, the MVPs, we had to give it to 2 guys. One of the premier 1-2 punches in the run game in college football. Phil Maffa and Will Shipley, they combined for 173 yards on the ground and a touchdown. But, you know, while those experienced guys were the MVPs, Clemson got a lot of contributions out of their youth.
They sure did. 4 true freshmen recording interceptions is ridiculous. And, of course, it comes right after we start talking good about Haynes King. He comes out and just absolutely plays horrific in Clemson. And, you know, that just makes sense. We talk good about someone, they lose. I picked Penn State. They embarrassed themselves last week. That's all I'm going to say on that. They looked awful. But Clemson, again, kind of finding their stride here as the season comes to an end.
Yeah, and, you know, I was really impressed by how their defense was able to just completely smother Georgia Tech's ground game. We saw there they got after it. 4 sacks, 11 tackles for loss in the entire game. Haynes King was never able to be comfortable in the pocket. And he really, you know, he had the Texas A&M in him show out where the lights were too bright, even though it was just a noon kickoff in Death Valley. Speaking of Texas A&M, firing Jimbo Fisher following a huge 51-10 victory over Mississippi State. We'll be covering that coaching search maybe a little bit in the winter off season, just to give a little teaser there. We'll see what goes on. Texas A&M, boatloads of money. We'll see who they try and go after. But back to Clemson and Georgia Tech. That was just that was kind of what we thought we'd see out of Clemson. A dominant run game. You know, Maffa and Shipley 173 yards, but they rushed for over 220 as a team. And then Cade Klubnik, efficient, and he was able to make good passes when it counted. 4 passing touchdowns.
Best performance of the year. I mean, as you said, 4 touchdowns, 23 of 34, only 205 yards, didn't need much. They're going to have a lot tougher opposition this weekend as they will try and defeat the University of North Carolina. It's a really good UNC team this year, JP.
Absolutely. And don't let the ranking kind of fool you. They're only, I believe, 20th in the country. They're 8-2, and they're 8-2 for a reason. They have one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football, Drake May, 3,145 yards, 21 touchdowns through the air, 8 on the ground, only 6 interceptions. And, you know, UNC, the story for them, even before they had Mac Brown, they're a great offense. They're a silly defense. They're not serious. They're not a serious football program. The defense isn't great, but it's better. Cedric Gray, one of the best players in the ACC, 96 tackles, 10 tackles for loss on the year, 4.5 sacks. But they're also been able to just generate a lot more havoc. It was before that their front 4, they would recruit these really high-ranked defensive linemen and edge rushers and linebackers, and they wouldn't be able to get any pressure. Now the secondary, it's still a big struggle, but they're able to get pressure on offensive lines, and you know Clemson's offensive line is nothing to write home about. So one of the best pressure teams in the ACC is going to try and get after it. But Clemson has experience shutting down some elite pressure. We saw it a couple weeks ago against Notre Dame. But Spencer, it's really going to, I think, come down to that matchup between Amarian Hampton and Jeremiah Trotter and the Clemson defense.
Yes, Hampton's one of the best running backs in the entire nation, over 1,200 yards already, 13 touchdowns. And going into the season, we weren't even sure if he was going to be the starting running back because they also have British Brooks, a guy who got injured and was out the whole season last year, but kind of started out as a running back battle. Hampton's established himself, again, star back of this team, but Drake May against this Clemson secondary and their front seven, it's going to be really tough to see how much time he has in the pocket, and just because they have the receiving talent, but it's going to be, can he get enough time to get them the ball?
And it's going to be, it's another tough environment for North Carolina to go play, and we've seen them in these situations, and they've kind of faltered. But they're going to be out for blood, too. They lost to Clemson in the ACC title game a year ago in what could have been one of the best seasons in North Carolina football history. They've lost 5 in a row in this rivalry matchup that usually pits pretty solid teams on the hardwood against each other, but now we're seeing it kind of expand to the football realm, and it's a battle of strengths. As you saw, there's an elite offense versus an elite defense. It's going to be, can Cade Klubnik make the UNC defense pay? Because what UNC is going to do, and we've watched them, we've grinded the tape, we've looked at the film. We take our job seriously here on Ball Don't Lie, but they're going to pin their ears back. They're going to load the box against Phil Moffitt and Will Shipley, and they're just going to dare Cade Klubnik to be able to make a quick, smart throw, not force anything, because UNC secondary, while they've struggled in allowing big plays, they make up for it with their ability to force turnovers. And it's going to be, can Clemson's wide receivers win one-on-one matchups, get separation, and then how is Klubnik going to get them the ball? Because he's not going to have a lot of time to do it. UNC is going to send some exotic 4- or 5-man pressures. They're going to send some stunts their way. Clemson's offensive line masterfully defended stunts a couple weeks ago against Notre Dame. They're going to be right up to the task again, I think, this weekend. It's going to be a great game. That's the thing about the ACC this year. Week in, week out, there have been great games. But outside of the Carolinas, we have some huge ranked matchups this week, including 5 teams in the Big 12 battling out 4 spots in that Big 12 title game. It's going to be a super fun weekend, I think, in a conference we haven't talked about much on the show outside of the big cheese, Texas and Oklahoma. But as you can see, there are 4 teams tied for second place at 5-2 in conference play. 5 ranked teams in action in the conference, and a lot of these ranked teams on the road. Look there, BYU hosting number 14 Oklahoma. That's a noon Eastern time kickoff. That's like, what, 9 a.m. local time in Provo?
I can't say I know much about Provo time, but I imagine it's something like that, and that's going to be a tough task for BYU's. Oklahoma, 2 losses, kind of, an unfortunate way they've kind of ended their season here, because it looked like they got out on the right foot. They defeated Texas. That was kind of the one game you had circled.
Yeah, and then they lose the next 2 after that. They bounced back in a good way last weekend against West Virginia with the big win. Then you have Oklahoma State. They were sitting pretty. They controlled their destiny, not just for a Big 12 spot, but if they won out, they would have had a great case to maybe be a 2-loss college football playoff team. They went on the road.
In New Year's Six Bowl.
They went to Orlando and got beat 45-3 by a bad Central Florida team. Now they're going on the road to a Houston squad that has made life just really tough on teams like Oklahoma and Texas. A big ranked rivalry showdown there in Lawrence with Kansas going up against Kansas State. Kansas lost a heartbreaker to Texas Tech last week. Kansas State bounced back in a big way with a nice win. But then our last matchup, Iowa State, who's quietly won 5 of their last 7 games in Ames, hosting the playoff hopeful number 7 Texas Longhorns, who suffered a huge loss as Jonathan Brooks, their star running back, out for the season. So now they're without Quinn Ewers. Now they're without Jonathan Brooks. It's going to be a testament to Texas's talent, depth, and coaching if they're able to go on the road to Ames against Matt Campbell and get a big win this weekend.
And I think Jonathan Brooks has been kind of one of the unsung heroes in college football. There's a ton of huge names in that Texas program, and he doesn't get near enough love, and they're going to be without him the rest of the season. It kind of smells a little like an upset alert to me, JP, is it's hard to win in Ames. And
this time of year, too.
Absolutely. It gets cold up there. It's no Austin. But they've kind of found their footing after a couple tough losses earlier in the season, already bowl eligible, and, I mean, they're still in this to cause some havoc.
Absolutely. Matt Campbell, he's really, I love seeing this in college football when a coach really establishes a high watermark for a program in his time there. And we're seeing it with Matt Campbell at Iowa State. Iowa State just a destitute program before he got there. They had like 1 draft pick in 51 years. And, He won a New Year's Six bowl game in the Fiesta Bowl against Oregon in 2020. He's gotten them to big matchups against Notre Dame in bowl games. He's gotten them to matchups against Clemson in bowl games. He's gotten them to 9 and 10 wins on seasons, stuff that Iowa State's never done before. Now they have a huge opportunity to get a huge win against a conference rival that's ditching them, and then they'd be really waltzing their way into an 8-4 record. One of the best coaching jobs, I think, in college football right now, Matt Campbell and the Cyclones. But man, there's a scenario this weekend.
They were calling for his head too. I mean, he's done a really good job of kind of silencing the critics because I don't remember what team they lost to, but they lost to
Ohio.
There we go, the Bobcats.
The
Losing to Ohio is not something any Iowa State fan would ever like to see, but he's done a really good job of kind of getting the season back under control, and they do look pretty good.
Yeah, and so, it's going to be, there's a scenario where so much chaos happens this weekend and Kansas ends up tied for first place in the Big 12 in football. We just need that to happen. I think we as an American nation need that.
Because it was always the Jayhawks,
It was
wasn't it?
always the Jayhawks, rock chalk.
Now going from the Big 12 to the Pac-12, the greatest conference on the planet, number 5 Washington travels to Oregon State to face the 11th ranked Beavs at home. JP, this might be the best game of this weekend.
I truly believe it is. It's a primetime ABC affair. College Game Day will not be there. They're going to James Madison as the undefeated Dukes host App State.
And they're fighting the NCAA at the same time.
Yeah,
we got 2
war on
games
2
this
fronts.
weekend.
But, Washington, they remain undefeated. They remain undaunted amongst this, this shadow in the valley of death schedule they're going through. They defeated top 15 Utah squad last weekend, and now they're going on the road to one of the best Oregon State teams of this century, and they still remain at number 5. I don't get it. I truly don't.
Are they watching the show and it's just a slap in the face to us, or
I personally feel slapped. I personally feel like I have been slapped in the face. The disrespect, the blatant disrespect shown to the Huskies. But guess what? In college football, you just have to go out there and prove it.
Yep.
You can prove to no one but yourself your skill, your ability on that football field, and you're going to be able to go out there. And it's we've talked about Michael Penix Jr. a lot on this show. Mm-hmm. But another transfer quarterback in the Pac-12 in this matchup, DJ Uiagalelei, formerly of the Clemson Tigers, putting together a very nice season. He fits the scheme of what Oregon State likes to do, the power run. They're going to put 11 guys on the line of scrimmage and just pound you in the face. It's going to be like watching, when Iron Man was in the Hulkbuster army, just punching Hulk in the face repeatedly. That's Oregon State football. That's what they do. And
that hurts, JP. I mean, I can't speak from experience, but that sounds pretty painful.
And playing the Beavs we watched Florida in their bowl game last year just get buzzsawed. And it's a defense that gets after it. They got the chainsaw sound when they get a third down stop or a turnover. They have the turnover chainsaw, and I love this team. But
new stadium, it's beautiful out there.
Exactly. It's all coming up Oregon State. They won their lawsuit to keep all the revenue and the rights to the Pac-12 from all the teams leaving it. A real slap in the face to the teams like Washington who are ditching the little guys like Oregon State and Washington State. Oregon State has a great opportunity to stick one to the big folks, leaving them behind this weekend. But Washington, we've talked about them a lot. Spencer.
And they've got, we can talk about Michael Penix all day long. They've got a really good run game with Dylan Johnson, almost 800 yards. He's got 11 rushing touchdowns, but it's the wide receiver tandem for me. Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk. Odunze at 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns. Polk's almost at the 1,000-yard mark. He's got 8 touchdowns. And it seems like wherever Penix wants to go with the ball, he's got a star on the other end of it, and his offensive line has only given up 7 sacks all year.
Yeah, that's going to be the big battle. It's Oregon State, their ability to get after the passer. They're one of the best teams in terms of sacks in the nation. And another, I think, the unsung battle of this game. Washington's defense has really struggled as of late, but they've been able to lock up in the red zone, playing a lot of bend, don't break football. They're one of the best red zone defenses in the nation, top 40, but they're going up against the 6th best red zone scoring offense in Oregon State. They score in the red zone over 98% of the time, one of the best we've ever seen out of their program. And so it's going to be, can Washington hold Oregon State to field goals when touchdowns are at a premium? And I feel like touchdowns will be at a premium this night. I don't think we're going to see the big flashy shootout some are expecting out of a game with such great offenses. I think we're going to see each scoring opportunity feel really like a massive momentum shift.
Yeah, and I think a game plan for Oregon State, I feel like they're going to really try and control the time of possession, especially with their dominant run game. They're just going to try and slow things down and keep the ball out of Michael Penix's hands. So that's all you can try and do against him, because once he's on the field, it's real hard to stop him from scoring.
Absolutely. And, I like how you mentioned Dylan Johnson. He's able to supplement Michael Penix Jr. In the pass game. They run a lot of play action, and him getting going as of late has helped a lot with getting separation outside on those play action concepts. And, even when you don't get separation, Michael Penix Jr. is going to fit into that tight window. This is just going to be one of the best games of the week. It could be one of the best games of the entire college football season.
Feels like we say that every week.
And it's because it's been such an amazing season. For a season that really feels like the last in an era of college football, we've really been spoiled this year. But we're going to take a quick break, and afterwards, we'll catch you up on what's happening in NCAA basketball this week and next.
And yesterday, the Gamecock women's basketball team wiped the floor with Clemson as they defended their home court with a 69-point victory. And you did hear that right, beating Clemson by almost 70. Just a decimation in Colonial life last night.
That's a really good word for it. Despite how terrible our uniforms look for the women's team, I still don't
know what they're doing there.
Yeah, like a team this good deserves to look better on the court. Look good, feel good, play good.
Yellow
it's a time-honored tradition. We don't have
what's
yellow
going
in
on?
our colors.
What's going on?
But yeah, a 109 to 40-point victory. Cardoso, another double-double, 15 and 13. The true freshman Malaysia Fulwiley, 18 and 9. She scored 47 points in her first 3 games as a Gamecock, the most in program history. And back on top, baby, the Gamecocks, slotting in at number 1 after a chaotic week of women's college basketball.
And they spent the entirety of last season atop the rankings until that tragic Final Four loss. But it's not just Clemson they've defeated. We talked about them defeating Notre Dame. They did defeat number 14 Maryland last Sunday as well.
By like 40.
It doesn't matter if it's unranked Clemson, top 15 ranked Maryland. The Gamecocks are just coming out and just clubbing you in the head. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. The offense averaging 107 points per game through 3 and holding opponents to just 62. It's absolutely ridiculous. Last night, we talked about some of the scoring from Cardoso and Fulwiley. Raven Johnson had 17 assists, the most in one game by a player in the SEC since 2005. Just a ridiculous team effort.
Yeah, I think the Gamecocks came into the year ranked just 6th in the nation. People were wondering, what's the offense going to look like? Because South Carolina lost a lot, and they were going away. They lost a lot of what made them able to win some of those big games by playing kind of low possession, back to the basket, slowing everything down, winning games like 50 to 51. And it's just the skill of Dawn Staley and her program, because they've been able to diversify the offense. They went from playing 1970s basketball to playing 2020s basketball at the drop of a hat. They lose so much, and they just come out of the gates firing on all cylinders. The jump shooting is what I was the most concerned about, because I was like, we saw it in the Final Four against Iowa.
Absolutely.
Iowa was able to completely vacate the perimeter and leave South Carolina shooters wide open, and we weren't able to make them pay. They've put in the work this offseason. It's early on, but the Gamecocks have gone through 3 pretty tough opponents, and they've emerged not just unblemished, but good God.
It's brutal to watch these other teams, but it's also just it's not one scorer for the Gamecocks. Sometimes it can feel like it's 1 or 2 players out there that have to do the bulk of the load scoring. It's not 1, it's not 2, it's not 3, it's not 4, it's not 5. When you have 6 or 7 players in double figures through 3 games, it's absolutely ridiculous. When you could just have that rotating cast, and whoever's in the game, they got a chance to at least drop 10 on you every single night.
Absolutely. Hey, but on the bright side for the Tigers, the men's basketball team has won 3 straight to start off the season in a pretty great form. They won the Asheville Championship. It was Clemson's first early season tournament win since the Space Coast Tournament in 2020. As it says there, there wasn't a name of this tournament. It was just the Asheville Championship. So they're just the champions of Asheville, North Carolina, I suppose. But it wasn't easy. Yeah, they got a little trophy there, and they emerged unblemished, but they were tested, Spencer, weren't they?
They sure were, as you have right there on your screen. They trailed 23-5 against Davidson, but in the second half, able to, cut that lead by the 3 ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe Girard, the Syracuse transfer, he was cold his first 2 games. He was cold in the first half against Davidson. Really turned it on. Dropped 17 points on 5 3-point attempts and 7 assists on the night as well for him. P.J. Hall was outstanding in the game against UAB, where Clemson, it was a fight through and through. Chase Hunter hit game-winning free throws with 3 seconds remaining, but they were able to be there on the back of P.J. Hall's 27 points, 9 rebounds, 3 blocks, and 2 steals. And then in the championship game against Davidson, Hall put up 17 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. And
guy that can do it all.
Yeah, he's a Wooden Award top 50 watch list. It's a Clemson team that, they had a great year last year, and now they're just really trying to build off that, and they have some great opportunities with some of their upcoming games, Spencer. Boise State this weekend, it's a Boise State program that, when you think about Boise State, you think about football. But Boise's won 20 or more games 11 times in the last 16 seasons. Their head coach, Leon Rice, 268 and 155 all time. He's been there since 2010. This is going to be a nice little matchup for the Gamecock, or for the Clemson Tigers. It
really is. And you mentioned seeing Boise State as a football team, but every year I get out my bracket and I'm like, the funny Broncos make it again.
Do they have a blue court?
That would be something. But it's not just Boise State, too. In a little bit more time, they take on 22nd ranked Alabama in the ACC-SEC Challenge, a team that lost Brandon Miller to our beloved Charlotte Hornets.
He's balling out, by the way.
He sure is. But that's a real test for the Tigers.
And I think it's going to be a great early point of the season with Clemson. You get a ranked opponent. Personally, I think a lot of teams in the SEC are not as good as portended by the media and the metrics. So we'll see early on if the ACC can notch another big feather in their cap non-conference-wise. They've had some big wins. Duke beating Kentucky in the Champions Classic, and the ACC-SEC Challenge replacing the ACC Big Ten Challenge because the Big Ten are cowards. But, I'm excited. Interspersed between those two games is a matchup with Alcorn State that Clemson should win pretty handedly. But, Clemson, football season winding down, they're going to start packing out Little John, one of the toughest places to play in college basketball.
Sure is, and as for the Gamecocks, they'll be spending this weekend in Glendale, Arizona, as they compete in the first annual Arizona Tip-Off Tournament. And we saw them defeat VMI at home earlier in the week, and that was actually a game in this tournament. But a lot of interesting teams in this bracket.
Yeah, South Carolina, each team from each division played each other on campus, and South Carolina kind of sticks out like a sore thumb because they're one of 2 power conference teams here. Joining them is DePaul of the Big East, but South Carolina's division is really tough. You got Grand Canyon, one of the better mid-majors of the last couple years. They hosted College Game Day last year, for Pete's sake. But San Francisco, another great mid-major, one of the historically great mid-majors, especially in that West Coast Conference. So the 2 power conference teams taking a little back seat to the mid-major action in this division. And then in the Desert Division, you have Northern Arizona, Purdue, Fort Wayne, and South Dakota, and VMI.
Just a bunch of...
Those teams play college basketball. This is to be certain.
It was also news to me when we were doing the research. I want to give a quick shout out to our producer, Tyler Perrone. Look at this beautiful graphic, man.
The gradient is so beautiful. Hey.
Wow.
Look good, feel good, play good, and that's the motto here for Ball Don't Lie.
Absolutely, but a late tip-off tonight for the Gamecocks in DePaul, 11:30 p.m. Eastern. If you're still awake, you want something to watch, you can see the Gamecocks take on their old pal, Chico Carter.
Absolutely. This is kind of an old-timey matchup. These 2 teams played a lot in the 80s when South Carolina was in the Metro Conference. And DePaul, it's a nice... It's
the Metro Conference.
The Metro Conference was awesome. It had Louisville, Florida State, Cincinnati, South Carolina. It was beautiful. Return to the Metro Conference. But, going back to this game, you mentioned Chico Carter, but South Carolina, they're definitely going to have an advantage. DePaul struggled early against some teams that, well, South Carolina, we don't know quite how good they are. They got a big win last Friday night against Virginia Tech. They got the win against VMI on Monday to move to 3-0 on the year. But BJ Mack's size down low, I think, is going to be a lot to handle for VMI or for DePaul because they lost all their big men. They had a mass exodus in the transfer portal. As someone very tapped in to the Big East Conference, they look terrible. They look like how people thought we would look this year. The Gamecocks, of course, but it's going to be a lot for them to handle, I think.
It is, and Miles Studi has really stuck out to me as the season started. He's kind of been the leading scorer for the Gamecocks. Him and BJ Mack, just a real tandem powerhouse. And I think we have to give a lot of credit to Lamont Paris, not only having this team looking better when there were tons of question marks, but also picking up Eli Ellis, the big commit, 4-star guard, just yesterday or 2 days ago. I mean, that's huge news for the Gamecocks, being able to recruit in North Carolina and kind of build up this program, and winning basketball will help do that.
Absolutely. I believe he was the second-ranked recruit in the whole state of North Carolina. The Tar Heel State, a huge basketball powerhouse. But, man, speaking of college basketball, this time of year, we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on Monday. An even bigger tournament's going to tip off, the historic Maui Invitational Tournament. Man, it needs no introduction, really. I mean, you can see there, these 8 programs have combined for 263 NCAA tournament appearances, 17 national titles combined through all them. Kansas with the most recent one against your Tar Heels in 2022. My apologies. But, man, you know, it starts on Monday. But it's a lot more than basketball this week, isn't it, Spencer?
It sure is. There's a much more important theme going on with this tournament. And since the wildfires that I'm sure you all know about broke out in Hawaii, the Lahaina Civic Center, the traditional home of the Maui tournament, is still being used as a hub for recovery efforts. So it's going to be hosted in a different location. It's going to be moved to the Stan Sheriff Center at the University of Hawaii campus. And they're partnering with the Maui Strong Fund, which is aiding the recovery across Hawaii, and creating the Hoops for Ohana Foundation, where you can donate directly to support people and places affected by the Maui fires. And just an awesome moment, JP. One time we actually get to talk a little bit about the news of basketball and not just the funny teams dribbling on the hardwood.
Yeah, you know, it's why sports are so special, because they can have these moments with the community that mean more than just the game itself. But, man, the games are pretty awesome, too.
Oh, they sure
on Monday, 9:30 a.m. tip-off on ESPN2. You got Syracuse. Yeah, you get your early fixings of hoops. And right now, down in Charleston, the Charleston Classic is going on. North Texas taking on LSU. I'll be sure to be tuning in once we wrap up this show. But Syracuse hosting number 7 Tennessee. Not hosting, but they're the home team for purposes of the uniforms. Number 7 Tennessee. At 12 on ESPN2, you got number 11 Gonzaga against number 2 Purdue. Zach Edey and the Boilermakers going up against the Bulldogs of Gonzaga.
Is Edey 25 now?
I think he's pushing his 401k a little bit too much in college right now. The winner of those two will play each other. Then 4 o'clock ESPN, you have Chaminade, the historical hosts, the winners of that epic upset in 1984 against Virginia. They're hosting number 1, Kansas. Can history repeat itself? We'll just have to wait and see. I'm very excited. That's going to be on ESPNU at 4 o'clock. Then 6:30 ESPN2. Number 4, Marquette, winners of the Big East last year. Tyler Kolek, one of the best players in all college basketball, going up against an outside of the top 25, but still in receiving votes, UCLA Bruins squad.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see them kind of sneak in here soon. And the winner of those games will play each other. I mean, tournament style. Let me explain a tournament to you. The winners play the winners, believe it or not.
The way the Maui tournament bracket is like situated, there's like, it looks weird. It's not a normal bracket. We were going to put it up there, but then we realized that it would be like showing like hieroglyphs to people. And so we just went with a fun little logo instead. But, it's all these ranked teams, these big names. They've, 3 AP Coach of the Years are going to be here. Mark Few amongst them. And it's just, this is what we want college basketball to be.
Absolutely.
It's these big games in Hawaii. Why is Kansas going to end up playing? If Kansas is playing Marquette, that'd be awesome. But why is Kansas playing Marquette in Hawaii? Because college basketball rules,
And I couldn't say any more to that. I mean, college basketball does rule. I think, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb and say sports rule. That's all we've got for you today. We'll be right back after the break with this week's Pick'ems to wrap up another episode of Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome back to BDL Pick'ems. I'm currently 26-9 on the season, while Spencer sits at a sickly 16-19.
Closing the gap. We're making it to 500.
Yeah. Objects in mirror are closer than they appear. But Spencer, Kentucky against South Carolina this weekend. Our Gamecocks going up against Kentucky in a game they have to win to keep their bowl hopes alive. Who you got?
I'm going to take the Gamecocks. I think it's, I believe in the team. They've showed a lot of growth, I think, in the last couple weeks. Surprisingly to me, I'm not going to lie, I didn't have that much faith, but I don't believe in Kentucky's offense that much, even though our defense has not proven itself against a really good opponent. I still take the Gamecocks, just Rattler and Leggett. I think they get it done again.
I think I'm going to have to agree with you, man. I think this is a wounded animal backed into a corner situation. I think the Gamecocks are going to lash out. It's going to be a lot of fun. But staying in the Palmetto State, we got number 20, North Carolina, going on the road to Clemson. Huge ACC matchup. You're not biased, but let us know.
I mean, I'm still going to take the Tar Heels, but even as just an objective football fan, I think this is a better team than Clemson. But they finally have to prove it. I think UNC should be undefeated on the year, and they just choke games. It's a tale as old as time.
Against Georgia Tech, against Georgia.
It's always Georgia Tech. In 2015, I remember. I believe they only had one loss in the whole regular season, and it was to Georgia Tech. And the Georgia Tech was horrible that year. It was just so perfectly fitting. But I think Drake May and the rest of this offense is going to be too much for Clemson. But I think I don't expect Kate Klubnik to have a good game, and I think that's going to be where the difference is.
You know, and everything you say sound right. However, personally, I went to Death Valley a couple weeks ago looking at a team that on paper was better than Clemson, on paper should have won, on paper had the better quarterback, had the better
what team was this?
I believe it was the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. You got your halfback in Notre Dame, but I just can't. I can't pick against that atmosphere. I can't pick against that defense. Clemson's going to get after it again. I think their defensive line is going to feast on another bad UNC offensive line. That's been another big thing holding them back. I think Kate Klubnik is not going to make a back-breaking mistake. I think he'll do enough, along with the ground game of Clemson, to salt away just a big win for Clemson, because the difference between going 8-4 and 7-5 is massive. Staying in the ACC, though, playoff hopeful number 10 Louisville goes on the road to Miami. Is it all about the U this weekend, Spencer?
No. Give me, as JP would say, give me Louisville. You know, you say it funny because you went there or something. I don't know. Apparently they get mad if you don't say it properly, but I just don't think Miami has what it takes. Feels like every week Tyler Van Dyke is at some point during the game injured. So they kind of, a backup quarterback is always in play for the Hurricanes. So I'm going to take Louisville.
And man, you know, Louisville, terrible sweet tea, but a clutch football team. In an old Big East rivalry matchup, you got Louisville going on the road, their best season in over a decade. L1C4, baby. Jack Plummer and the Cards are going to get it done in South Beach. And, you know,
we're going to switch coasts now, JP.
Yeah, with a ranked versus ranked matchup that's stuck on the Pac-12 network.
Well, I was about to say, guess what conference it's in? Pac-12, baby. Utah, Arizona. JP, who you got?
You know, Arizona, they're having a great year. They're 7-3 on the season. They had a clutch last-second field goal victory against Colorado in Boulder last week. And, you know, it's really tough because they're on such a roll. Utah's coming off of a couple losses. But how much longer can I bet against the pig farmer and his skill in Kyle Whittingham? Give me the Utes of Utah getting a big win against the Wildcats.
Yeah, it's not all about the U, but it is all about the Utes. Give me Utah over Arizona. Apparently Arizona also bankrupted recently. I don't know if you heard about this. Yeah. They somehow they might not have sports next year. So I'm going to go with Utah.
It was like an accountant error. We might get on that at some point. But
don't know how that happens. We might have more on that later, but no matter what, I'm taking Utah. I don't have faith in the Wildcats. It's that simple.
No faith is crazy. But hey, staying on the West Coast, but going down a level, the Mountain West Conference, a huge game to decide first place in the Mountain West. We mentioned one of these teams last week, the UNLV Running Rebs going up against the Air Force Falcons. Spencer, the troops against the Rebels.
It was always the troops, JP. Give me the Falcons. I think they run all over UNLV, and I think they might take the Mountain West this year. It's going to be close, but.
Yeah, you know, Air Force started out the year 8-0. They've suffered 2 straight losses in really just tough fashion. They turned the ball over a lot last weekend in Hawaii. UNLV, it's a great story, but you're about to see the GDP of the American people go to work as Air Force is just going to bulldoze them. And our final game, Washington, Oregon State.
The moment you've all been waiting for.
The moment you've all been waiting for. Spencer, make your pick.
I said it last week in the Garden. I'll say it here from the stage. I'm not betting against Washington. This is a number 5 ranked team that should be in the top 4. They're my favorite team in the country. They're the best team in the country in my eyes. They have the best wins to prove it. It was always the Huskies, JP. That's all I'll say. Who do you have this weekend in Corvallis?
I've always picked the Huskies. I've always been a Husky supporter. But it's college football. It's November. This is when chaos is abound. And as much as I love Washington, as much as I love Michael Penix Jr., and I love this program, I love the Huskies, it's hard to win every single game in college football. It's hard to go on the road and beat a team having their best year. All the emotions and the context behind this for Oregon State. And I really think that DJ Uiagalelei is going to return to the primetime spotlight and make some big plays. He's not going to pass for 300 yards. He's not going to have 5 touchdowns, but he's going to have some key plays. I think Oregon State, when the going gets tough, the Bees are going to get going. They're going to rev up those chainsaws, and I think they take it to Washington's undefeated season and chop them down. As heartbreaking as it is to say, give me the Beavs.
It's heartbreaking to say. You must know how heartbreaking it is to hear. I'm about to cry. That's going to do it for this episode of Ball Don't Lie. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and Facebook at SGTV at USC.
To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at sgtv@usc.com. For SGTV, I'm JP Barry.
And I'm Spencer Ball. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great weekend, Carolina. Forever to thee.